All right.
Right
Welcome
there.
back to the Real Kindness Games. Pew pew pew.
Love it.
Hey, our very first guest pew pew pews. So as you all know, the Real Kindness Game sheds light on our personal biases and encourages kindness by modeling curiosity in our conversations so that we can appreciate another human being for their unique perspective and experiences so that we can heal our communities together. As humans, we have far more in common than that what divides us. And I think today's conversation is going to be very interesting, especially for that. So, Tim, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about the most interesting topic I can think of, part two, that is Samira.
There's
I
far more
met
interesting people out
Samira,
there.
right? I met Samira, I guess it was like a month ago now, right? And we got into our backgrounds, just getting to know each other. And this whole theme of imposter syndrome came up. And I was like, yeah, I totally have that. And she's like, really? That's interesting. And then you began to tell me about how growing up, kind of being torn between two cultures, your family's culture and American culture,
Mhm.
how you kind of were on a journey to find out who exactly you were or could be in any given situation. And you really helped me understand like what that struggle feels like and how you overcame it. And I would just love to spend the next 15 minutes exploring that.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I mean, for those that tuned in the first time, you may remember my family's originally from Tanzania, which is a small country in East Africa. My family is Muslim, and our heritage is Iranian, Indian, and Arab. So fairly mixed. My first language was Swahili, so was not English, and kind of moved over here when I was about a year and a half old. My dad worked for the World Bank, so international organization, brought us here, left our family back home. Definitely visited every couple years for sure, but I mostly grew up in Northern Virginia, and it was really interesting because being the daughter of immigrants and Muslim immigrants at that, right? My parents were fairly religious, and they wanted to very much stick to kind of their roots and culture. And I think a lot of people realize that like, look, I'm not a practicing Muslim anymore. However, when people ask me, I identify as Muslim because it's just as much a culture as it is a religion. And I think a lot of what the religion teaches kind of shaped who I am today and things like that as well, right? But what's interesting is I come over here. I was very blessed and fortunate to go to private school my entire life. They were the best schools over here. Part of the reason my dad agreed to move was for the education, not necessarily for his own career, but so that I could get a better life. And I went to small Catholic schools, and then I went to private non-denominational schools. But the majority of my classmates were not very diverse. It was a lot of sort of white or black students, but again, the black students were a little bit in the minority. I was certainly like one of two, maybe three Muslims in an entire class. Our class sizes were very small. So I think, like, I gotta be honest, right? I didn't notice it a ton when I was younger, because I'll tell you this, my parents allowed me to take the religious studies. In fact, they encouraged it, right? They were like, you should learn about other cultures and other religions and things like that. So I went to the Bible classes, I went to mass, and all of that kind of, I didn't take communion or anything like that, but I definitely attended. And then at the same time, there was a small community of Muslims here, or up in Northern Virginia. So we would go to mosque every now and again. And then certainly when I went back home, right? So when we would visit Tanzania, when we would visit relatives in Toronto, very much went to mosque, said my prayers 5 times a day at home. So I was practicing when I was younger, and fasted during Ramadan, the whole 9 yards. And what was really interesting about it is, I think in the beginning, I didn't realize it like as much, but I think maybe like middle school, high school is really where you sort of start questioning yourself a little bit more. Some of it started with like something as simple as going to the pool over the summers, right? Where traditionally Muslim girls around the age of 9, 10 are no longer really encouraged to wear a bathing suit and go out in public like that. Most are asked to wear hijab. Now, my father didn't make me do that. he kind of gave me that choice in college. I gotta be honest, I toyed around with it a little bit, but didn't end up doing it. My mother doesn't wear a hijab, but she does pray. So like there are all kinds of Muslims out there. So part of it, right, was as simple as the summertime, and you see all your friends out there. We lived in an apartment building, and all my friends are down there, and I can't go there, and it's hot, and I can't wear shorts, and I have to wear long skirts, and even the uniform skirts. Like my uniform skirts were the longest ones. Like that, instead of like little people running around with a ruler seeing if there was an inch above my knee, like mine was well below my knee. Like no need to measure my skirts. But that had me doing things like, and I get most typical teenage girls probably do this too. Like you hike up your skirt, right? You roll it up so that it pulls itself up. But I think the funny thing is my other friends were doing that and making it super short. I was just trying to get mine above my knees. And I just, I remember that, like, I still remember the fights and my mom, finally sewing it, like still modestly, but at least there. But there's even that, right? And then there's the whole, like, as you get older too, I think, when you're 15, 16, the whole concept of like arranged marriages as well comes up, right? And that is a completely foreign concept in the West. Like arranged marriages, like what is this? Whereas in Eastern cultures, you're like conditioned for arranged marriages growing up. So I think that was probably the other really big thing. And I gotta be honest, I remember when I was probably in my 20s going to listen to a more modern mullah, right? It's kind of what an English like preacher is. And he was actually lecturing, right? He was kind of giving what's called the khutbah or the sermon. And he would say, he's like, we tell our girls who live here in the West, like you can go to school with these boys, but you can't marry them. So you can't talk to them. You can talk to them and interact with them, be friends with them, but you can't marry any of them. And then you bring your girls to the mosque and the men and the women are separated. And so but these are the boys you can marry one of them, but you can't talk to them and you can't go out with them. Like there's no dating. That's not a thing. So you're in this situation where you're like, wait a minute, I'm supposed to get married to somebody I'm not supposed to get to know. Like, what is that about? So then you find yourself too, right? Like when I would hang out with my cousins or go back home, everyone was talking about that. They were talking about the sons of other families and, oh, do you think that this would be a good match or that would be a good match? And I'm sitting there going, you people are 16. Are you crazy? What about college? What about getting a job? What about all these other things, right? And I got to be honest, right? For as strict as my parents were growing up, my dad was very much, you are going to get a degree. You are going to stand on your own 2 feet. Your options are math or science, right? Don't care that you can communicate with people. Don't care that you like to translate things and can write. Like math or science, pick one. So I ended up in tech. But it was just one of those things where even that, right? Like it was all these choices of, well, if I spoke out against my cousins, which I did a couple times, right, trying the waters, I was looked at like I was a crazy person. So I was like, well, wait, maybe I'm the wrong one. And I would have my aunts try to fix me up and like ask me and like their way of fixing you up is the family all comes to the house, and like you come out and offer them
Like an
tea.
intervention.
Yep.
Like,
It really is.
We're worried about your brain.
Samira, what's really interesting is like as you were talking, like I had so many parallels in my own life as well. Like we moved to the United States when I was 11, and so I think we had like a similar but different experience because my parents like literally brought us here because in Pakistan there was like a war going on between India and Pakistan. It was like, hey, we need to get out of here. We need to get a better life for our family. And my parents really expected us to like follow in the footsteps of like that female identity, right? Like you're gonna help out around the house. You have, like, we don't really care about your education, but like you're being really primed to go get married when you turn a certain age. And I personally used to feel like I was living like a 007 type life, like I was this spy, because I would go into the Western environment, like in school or go hang out with my friends, and I was this completely different person, right? Like I had like musical choices and the clothes that I wore and the way that I talked. And then when I came home, it was a completely different person because my parents only saw this girl who like would sit in the corner and like read books or play video games because that's that's all that you could show, right? Like your parents have this one idea of you and you have this other idea of you. How do you like
Right.
reconcile the two? Like where in your life did you feel like you finally came into your own? Because
Yeah.
there's these two different personalities fighting against each other, especially in
Yeah.
a Eastern culture.
Sure. No, that's a great question. And honestly, I think it wasn't until I was in my 30s, right? It wasn't until I met my husband that I kind of got to that point where I'm like, you know what? I can't do this double kind of life anymore. And you know what, for the most part, I would say like, look, my parents allowed me to go away for college. Like I went to Rochester Institute of Technology for a year, and then ended up transferring back home, moved back home, and then I moved to work for my first job. I was a couple hours away. So I would see my parents on the weekends. But to your point, right? It's that whole during the week, I got to work and hang out and wear what I wanted pretty much and whatever. But I still remember the ritual too, right? Of getting in the car, driving up to 95, pulling my hair into a ponytail,
Yep.
making sure I had long sleeves on. And I didn't feel like I had to, right? As so much as like I wanted to do it out of respect for my father. However, it did feel like I was like changing. And I think like it almost doesn't strike you because you're so used to doing that, right? The back and
Yep.
forth and the transition and being a little bit covert about some of the things you're doing or who you're talking to on the phone. I mean, I never remember like who's on the phone. Oh, it's
Oh my
Mary.
God.
Like,
Oh
right?
my
Do you remember
God.
that? Like,
The
it's
phone calls and the text messages. Like I remember like certain times where I'd be like, oh my God, like my mom's gonna take my phone and like look at who I was texting. And like I was one of those kids that would like delete my text messaging history. Like now if someone's like, oh yeah, delete, I'm like, you're a psycho. Like get out of
right.
here.
Exactly. Like I'm not going to do all that, but it really, so it was that. And let's look at it. I tried it my parents' way as far as like the arranged marriage, and I should just like start out. Like I could write a book about the just ridiculousness of conversations I had with people,
You should
while
write
I was
that
like,
book.
I should, I just like write a blog about it, right? Like forget regular dating life, which is also just as bad
Oh,
sometimes. But like this special thing where it's like I remember getting these photographs via email
the
that look
bio
like,
data is,
yes, the bio data is and like
yeah,
the
I call
glamour
it
shot.
mommy Tinder. It's mommy Tinder. It's like
Oh,
mom sets you up, but it's not a you go like on a date. It's
yeah,
mom goes, here's a nice boy. You're gonna have a phone conversation with him. If it works out, you might meet with chaperones,
Chaperones.
and then
right.
if it works out, you get married.
Yep. Oh, and I almost did when I was 20. I was right before my 21st birthday, and it was a family friend who had moved to Northern Virginia, and we had gotten set up, and he was more liberal than most of the ones that I had met. I really kind of, I liked him. He was nice. My parents allowed us to, right, the first meeting, yes, we were all together. And then, of course we were allowed to sort of go out on our own a couple times, but no holding hands, no kissing, like
Of course.
nothing, just very kind of, in our boxes. And what I thought was funny was, it was like right around my birthday, and he said to me, because we'd even got told our parents, like, yep, I think we're going to agree to this, right? So we're marching down this arranged marriage route, and then kind of out of nowhere, I was getting ready to travel to Toronto for Eid around my birthday, and he kind of takes me out and tells me, he's like, you know what, I don't think this is going to work out, but this is the best part. He goes, you meet almost every piece of criteria I have for a wife, but I think you're a little too religious for me. And I just lost it. And I lost it like laughing, because I was like, wait, I'm too religious, hold on a second, right? Because it was just, and I don't know, because he's like, yeah, I mean, you won't even try to hold my hand. And I was like, yeah, no, I mean, we're not supposed to, like, these are the rules. And I get we were like going out and stuff, but you're part of, so it was just kind of very strange. But I think that's one of those things where, and I was heartbroken, right? At 21, thinking that I'm going to make my parents happy, because like, let's be honest, like I was a little bit of a rebel growing up too. And my parents will tell you that like I was a difficult child. And my mom now likes to tell me that my 3-year-old, who can be a little bit difficult, she's like, isn't karma fun? Um, like, it's just one of those situations where I, I was heartbroken at the time, because I was like, great, now I've disappointed my family. And, I'm getting ready to move to Richmond and start this new life and a new job. And I'm going to be all by myself and all these things. And of course, my mom and dad were they're like, look, probably wouldn't have worked out. It's a good thing you guys noticed it now versus later. It'll be fine. There'll be more. And there were, right, there were other, some people were like, oh, we saw your daughter on like somebody's wedding video or at a wedding or whatever. And so there were
Oh, the
proposals
weddings.
in, and my dad, I think at the time was like, you know what, let her get her degree and then we'll, and I had gotten my degree already, but that was like earlier. And it was like, he knew I wanted to get a second degree. So he's like, let her focus on getting her master's degree. And when she's done, and of course my mother was like, but she'll be 24. Like, oh my, she would be ancient. Who will marry her? And like, I love my mom to pieces because she's definitely changed. But at that moment, because you've got all of her sisters and her brothers,
Yep.
and then all the cousins are
The
getting,
family pressure.
they're
Yeah, I think
all
people
arranged.
people in the
Right.
Western culture like don't realize like how important that family like
Yes.
influences. It's like
Yeah.
the dad's brothers and sisters and mom's brothers and sisters, and everyone's getting married and everyone's following like this singular path of what the culture deems
Yeah.
appropriate.
Right.
And then you come out as like this black sheep, like you're
Right.
even considered a black sheep because, oh, you're going to college, or you've got like this completely different ideal, or you're gonna go like have, whoa, white friends, what?
Right. I know, right. What am I
What?
gonna do? Well, and I moved out, right? I moved out to move to Richmond, and they were all like, she's gonna get into trouble.
What?
Moving, she's supposed to move from your house to her husband's house. Like, what's going on here? And so yeah, like it's really weird. And you know what's weird too? I think like you asked earlier, how do you kind of bring the two pieces together? What's also weird though is like when you're in one part of that lane, you truly feel like that's the lane you belong in. And then you kind of like leave the environment and go to the back to like your other environment, and you're like, no, actually this is what I want. So right, because like when we would go to Tanzania, I would be like, well, this is where I belong here. Like that's kind of when I contemplated even like potentially wearing the hijab and becoming a more devout Muslim. And then I would come back here and I would just be like, well, wait a second, right? It's such a different atmosphere. It's such a different thing. And I kind of was like, I can still practice. And I can pick and choose what it is that I do. Because at the end of the day, to me, it's like, even the hijab, to me, it's like, yes, it's a physical manifestation of your faith. However, it's just a code of modesty, right? Which also exists for men, which I think people forget. Is Muslim men have a code of conduct that they have to follow as well. But people tend to focus very much on women in the Islamic faith, and it's not always fair, but it's there. And so I think I even just had a hard time figuring out, well, which life do I prefer? But I think the problem was I thought I had to pick one.
Right.
And so, right, so I kind of like we'll fast forward like to when I was in my 20s to kind of when I was in my 30s, and like I dated, right? I tried it my parents' way a few times. I tried it my way a few times, like meeting people, coworkers or friends of friends, and having some long-term relationships a year or two, but not telling my parents about it.
Of course
Um,
not.
and then when I finally met my husband, Carl, what was interesting is when we first started dating, and when things were getting more serious, he was like, yeah, because I met his parents, and he was like, well, when am I going to meet yours? And I'm like, oh yeah, until there's a ring on my finger, you're not meeting my parents. And he was like, what? That's not how it works in our culture. Like, I want to ask your parents permission for your hand in marriage. And I'm like, yeah. So I'm terrified of my parents, and if should this not work out, and like not terrified that I thought they were going to disown me or do anything to me. I think
Right.
it was a disappointment. A little bit was
Yeah.
I just didn't know what the reaction would be. Because
Yeah.
again, in my family, on my dad's side, not a single person had ever not had an arranged marriage out of all of my cousins, out of all my aunts and uncles. On my mom's side, my elder cousin did. He married outside. But also the rules are, right? I say the rules lightly. A Muslim man can marry outside their religion, but a Muslim woman is not supposed to, because technically you have to follow what your husband tells you to do. And so you would have to potentially do something against your faith because your husband said so, because your faith said you have to listen to your husband.
Man,
Right? It's very complicated. So
my
it's
mind already is like,
right?
oh
You're like, "Wait,
God,
what
I
did you
can't.
say?" So I tell him this, and so he was just like, okay. So so we continued dating. We dated for about a year, and he proposed. And when he proposed, I was over the moon, excited about it. I called my mom. I told her, I was like, hey, you probably suspected, like I've been dating somebody. Here's who he is, and blah blah blah. He just asked me to marry him. Can you tell Dad? So of course, so she did. She got off the phone with me. She said, congratulations. She was super excited. she she knew his background. He's, blue eyes, light hair. And my dad then called me back maybe like an hour later, and I see the phone ring, and I'm just like, oh God. So like I pick up the phone, right? Like I'm just like, oh, what's gonna happen? And he's like, so mom tells me you want to get married. And I was like, yes. Of course he goes through a few of the questions, like, what does he do? This, that, and the other. And he goes, we're gonna have to meet him. Can you guys fly down to Florida? Right. And I was like, sure. Can you send some hotels that are in the area so he can, stay there? And my dad's like, we're not going to make him do that. Right. The house is big enough. We'll put you in one room. We'll put him in another room. Come. And so we flew down to Florida, and, we get there the first night. We ended up coming kind of late in the evening. And the other funny thing is my husband's very tall. He's like, I think he's the shortest in his family, and he's 6'2". So and my family is on the shorter end of things, right? I'm 5'1". My mother is shorter. My dad's is small stature as well. So like Carl's like towering over them, like over our family as we're going into the car where we drive. They're just having like general chit chat conversation. But it was late in the evening, so we get there. My parents put me in the bedroom like right next to theirs upstairs. They put Carl down in the basement. There's a guest bedroom down there, so we're like nice and separated. And I think I was just nervous. So I fell asleep, and I fell asleep hard. And I wake up and I hear voices downstairs, and I go barreling down the stairs, and Carl and my dad are laughing about something. Right. And it happened to be apparently what happened. And they relayed the conversation to me is my dad was like, so like, you've already gotten engaged. You want to get, I don't understand. Like, help me understand what's going on right now. And of course, my mom had been like talking about my ring in the back seat. Like when I got in there, he did a very, very nice job on it. And so she was just like, oh, and Carl was like, didn't you hear them like talking about the ring? Like she has a ring up, like we're already engaged. And my dad's like, oh, I thought, and Carl did this whole like, well, I would have wanted to ask you, but like she told me like I couldn't until she had a ring. And my dad was like, I don't understand. And so we had a nice big laugh about it. And I tried to sort of explain it to my parents. And my parents were very much like, well, wow, we're sorry we made you feel that way. But is it us that made you feel that way? Or did you make these assumptions based on other things going on, other people, and your own just sort of, right? Like you didn't ask, you didn't tell us. So how could we have kind of come to that?
That's often the crux of it, right? That fear keeps us from being who we are.
Yes.
I know
Absolutely.
that's been true for me in the past, but like since last year happened, like I just stopped caring. And from hearing Kehkashan's story, that's the human experience, isn't that? And even today, with these crazy conversations that are and are not happening at the same time, people are yelling, but there's no discussion. This can't happen. Isn't it the fear of what might happen if we have the conversation? The fear that I may realize that I'm on the wrong side, or I may realize there's some value to your argument. And what would that do to me as a person?
Absolutely.
How do we get past that, Samara?
That's a good, well, and I think it's one of those things, like, how do you get past it? Like, sometimes it's just, and I think I said first, sometimes like someone's just got to take the first step and ask. I like to sort of preface things with, I have a dumb question, or I have a question that may offend you, right? But I truly am trying to understand. And then to try, I think too, like, not only is there fear involved, but people don't listen anymore to understand. They listen to answer, like to answer back, right? So they're already thinking of their counter argument or why they're right or whatever based on any little thing you say. And that also is a problem. We're not active listeners. And so I think if people would just take the time to, and also, right, people don't want to appear ignorant. And so they don't want to say, I don't know, right? I don't know enough about your religion or where the country that you come from or anything else. They want to appear worldly and knowledgeable. And so they just sort of make it up as they go along, or go off of what they saw in a movie or what they saw here or what they saw there. And
or shut it down.
It's hard. And even that part about like being afraid to stand up for things or be affiliated with things too. I mean, I think there was even a time where right, sort of that oscillation between, I wanted to be part of the Muslim Students Association at schools. I wanted to go to like the Indian Student Association stuff. I wanted to hang out with the Persian students, but at the same time, I was like, I'm afraid that people are going to think that that's all I am and not really look at me as a holistic person, right? But I think nowadays too, right? I don't know that it's just visual minorities that have that problem. Like, this is going to probably sound controversial, but I think right now the white man probably has just as much of a problem with that than like the black man does, quite frankly. Now, don't get me wrong, the experiences are absolutely different, but are they becoming so different? Right? I'm making assumptions off of that, and it's not fair. But what makes that okay? But one thing okay, and the other thing not okay. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't know.
No, and I think where you've landed is actually the perfect spot. Today, we are so divided and so polarized and self-righteous about whatever our stance is, and yet we are not willing to communicate.
Yeah.
We are not willing to have a discussion, because a lot of times we don't even know why we have the position we have. It just feels right.
Right.
Right. And so if we're not going to be curious with ourselves to investigate,
Yeah.
to do our research, to find out, how did I land here? Right.
Right.
The story you told is a story of a journey of, you went through lots of different things to get to a point to say, how did I even get here and where do I want to go?
Yeah.
We need to do that with ourselves, with our mindsets, with our ideas, with the physical past of life experience we have. And right now, because that's not happening, I will say with pretty much confidence, nobody feels comfortable where they are right now, because it's not okay to be comfortable, because definitions and things are changing, and every day it's like, oh no, that's not the thing anymore, this is the thing.
Right.
Right.
And if you do this, you're now a part of this other problem that we just thought up.
Right.
And I think, I know, if we're going to get past the imposter stage with ourselves or with our communities, we have to get to the point to where we say, I opt out.
Yeah.
I am going to choose my path. I'm going to own my journey.
Mhm.
And I will not conform because you want me to.
Yeah.
I will create my identity because I choose to.
Yeah.
Kehkashan, you have like 30 seconds to get the last word before we get zoomed
I
out.
know. No, I think this is like the right place for us to end, because it is exactly what this session today was about understanding that our life doesn't need to be black or white. It's anything that we want it to be. We are the owners of our own destiny and of our own journey, and we have to define what we want to be in this life, and don't worry about everyone else around you. There you have it. Thank you, folks.
For coming on again.
Yep.
It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.